I'm going to talk a little bit about breath mastery as a means to stable the mind and end stress and become happy and even enter very deep meditative states. I'm going to read from an article that I wrote about 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to read parts of it and then talk about parts of it. And that's how we're going to do it. So here we go. So the first paragraph is, the name of the article is Dancing with the Breath. So the gist of the article is that although mindfulness of breathing is considered a meditation, it's not something that we are not familiar with, even if we've never even heard of meditation. For example, if you're reading a really good novel, or you're looking at a gadget and you're trying to figure out how it works, as you focus your attention, you're becoming very absorbed in that, whatever it is you're doing. Like if you're putting something together and you get to the final stages of it, you really got to focus, you'll notice your breath slows down. Well, that's because the thought is slowing. So thought and breath, they're very much linked. When thought slows, the breath slows. So we all experience that. It's nothing we don't know about. But what the yogis and the great meditation masters have done is they figured out, well, why not expand that? Because that's a very pleasant state when we become absorbed in something. And why not stretch it out? So what these yogis did is they figured ways to stretch out that period when we get absorbed in a book, and make it really interesting and go deeper, very much deeper into our conscious awareness, our awareness of ourselves. So they made a science out of it, and it's called breath mastery, or pranayama. So the next paragraph talks about, we go way back into 1969 when I was exploring the Dharma as around 22 or 3 years old. I went to Jagannath Puri, South India. I stayed for 6 months in Puri on the beautiful seaside coastal. It was a village at the time. Now it's a major tourist city. And I entered a white marble ashram on a full moon festive occasion and sat with a group of devotees. We're reading from the text now. Their guru was seated sideways to the gathering with a water bowl with flowers floating in it in front of him. He repeatedly picked up a flower, held it above his head, and he recited a few mantras and dropped the flower on his head. As each flower touched his head, he entered samadhi, a breathless state, and emerged a few minutes later. His name was Priyananda Swami. The Swami Paramahansa Yogananda installed as abbot to look after the ashram of his teacher, Sri Yukteswar. So this was really a marvelous, very fantastic opportunity for me as a seeker of, a real yogi. That's why I left Hawaii, to find a yogi. So I stayed 2 years in India and Nepal as a young person. And so this was like really a authentic introduction to what it means to really meditate deeply. So what was happening here, what he was demonstrating, was his phenomenal control of his breath. He was able to coordinate the flower touching his forehead, and consciously subdue his outer breath, which is the one we all know, where we breathe in and breathe out, and plug into what is called the inner breath, which actually is the life-supporting breath. That's what keeps us alive, and it's what leaves us at the time of death. When we exhale at our last breath, it's not really the last breath. The last breath to leave is the inner breath. And that inner breath leaves our body a few minutes after the outer breath does, sometimes hours later. In the case of Paramahansa Yogananda, who was cremated at Forest Lawn Mortuary, he stayed in his body a whole month. And there's a letter from Forest Lawn that says they've never seen anybody stay a whole month, let alone even hours, without some kind of decay. But Yogananda stayed a whole month. His body remained warm, and he looked fresh, like he was sleeping. And when he left, the warmth departed. And that departure is the inner breath, the life force leaving. And it goes out the top of the head, unless you go to hell, and then it goes out your feet. But most of us hopefully will not do that. So in the case of Yogananda, he was in that state a long time. But for most of us, we'll still stay, our heart will stay warm for at least 15 minutes. And then that inner breath leaves. So what the demonstration I saw with the flowers was this master dropping the flower on his head and basically plugging into, sustaining himself with the inner breath. And his outer breath ceased. And when that outer breath ceases, time stops. So it doesn't matter if you're sitting 15 minutes or an hour or a day. It all seems like a finger snap when you come out. And I know this from hearing stories of great masters who have done that, sat for extended days in that breathless trance. So now the next paragraph. Well, basically in the next paragraph, I'm talking about how the really interesting thing about it and the authenticity that was demonstrated, how it affected me, was that instead of feeling that he was some great yogi demonstrating something that was way beyond what I could feel, I felt, wow, I can do that. And everybody there seemed to feel the same way. They felt encouraged. So he was a really great master because he was able to communicate to people just through this incredible demonstration that it's something everybody has within them, this inner breath, and you can do it too. You don't have to just watch me do it. And the next paragraph talks about that his skill, it's obvious that like entering a breathless state like that at will is incredible skill. But being able to emerge with full intention is even more skillful, because most people have no control. At least in the early stage of this kind of breath mastery, once you enter, you don't have much control or any control when you come out. It could be a half hour, 10 minutes, 2 days, 1 day. Generally, it's, about an hour or two, from what I gather. But, I personally witnessed somebody that was in that state for 6 months when I saw him. So we don't know, but he was able to emerge from that state consciously. Incredible, and then go on and do it again and again over a period of about 45 minutes, several times. And we all watched, and it was amazing. We had a big feast afterwards. I had a huge leaf plate of food that was given to me, because you can ask the server to give you as much as you want. So we all ate together, all of the people that witnessed this thing, and I had this huge leaf plate of food. And the yogi that gave the demonstration, Priyananda Swami, the abbot, he saw my huge leaf plate, and then he said to me, "You can take as much as you want, but you got to eat it all." And when they tell you that in India, it means you don't leave even one grain of rice on your plate. But there's no problem with me for that. So, next paragraph. The next paragraph just talks about that the breath mastery is a lot simpler than many forms of meditation. You know, like, you don't have to memorize mantras, you don't have to study philosophical texts, you don't have to, make elaborate visualizations and remember all sorts of diagrams, sacred diagrams or sacred syllables. And it's very, very, to practice meditation properly, you really have to have a philosophical understanding of what the foundation of the meditation is. And that can take, in my case, took years of study. So without that understanding, it's easy to meditate incorrectly. But the breath is a little safer, it's natural to us. And so there's not a lot of the hardship involved of time spent with books and learning. And so that next paragraph points that out, the simplicity and the fact that the breath is always there with us and it's very reliable. And the practice itself is so simple, with the recitation of mantras and with visualizations, it's easy to get your concentration wrong and the focus wrong. And with the breath, when you do, it's more obvious and it's easier to correct yourself. So in that sense, it's ideal. And obviously, we always have the breath with us. So let's see here now. The next paragraph just talks about how we become aware of the breath when we first become aware of the breath. It's quite a dramatic occasion. The first breath we take is usually accompanied by lots of crying, and then we feel our mother's breath on our forehead and her breast in our mouth, and then from then on until the day we die, it pretty much goes on all automatically. But what we don't realize, usually until the day we die, is that beneath this breath, this ordinary breath that we experience throughout our lives, there's an inner breath that really makes all that breath possible. And if we can experience that while we're alive, instead of waiting to die, then we really have a great, great source of happiness. If we can do that on a regular basis in meditation, it's incredible. That's what Priyananda was demonstrating. So then the next thing is, the next paragraph talks about, that there's a long period of difficulty and boredom and tediousness, because watching the breath, it's not, you're not going to be excited right away or absorbed in it right away. It's going to be boring and tedious and so forth, just like any other meditation is. So you got to put up with that. It's not like you got a lot of stuff that you got to go through before it gets interesting. It's going to bring your faults to the surface, your anxieties to the surface, your sense of self-doubt to the surface. All of this, it churns up. That's a sign the meditation's going well, by the way. If your meditation is going well right away and you feel all happy and everything, then you're meditating incorrectly. Correct meditation for the first few years, at least the first year, is going to bring all your, not so nice stuff to the surface. So that's a sign you're doing well. So don't lose faith. Just just bear it out and have faith in yourself that you'll come out of it. So a simple practice is gone through in the next paragraph. Next paragraph just talks about how to do it. There's so many forms of this. There's hundreds. There's different kind of techniques for regulating the breath. But all of those techniques are great if that's what you want. But you can begin and probably finish with a very simple technique of watching the air go in your nostril, listening, feeling it. Sitting quietly, feeling the breath go in with your mouth shut and preferably your tongue turned back on the roof of your mouth and your mouth shut and breathing through your nose. And when the breath goes in, feeling the cool air going in your nostril. When the breath goes out, feeling the warm air exiting the nostril. Now, you just do this, and you can accompany it by labeling. I am breathing in when you feel the cool air, and I'm breathing out when you're breathing. When you're exhaling the warm air. And try it for a half hour and see if you can not bumble it up and say I'm breathing in when you're really breathing out, or I'm breathing out when you're really breathing in. And this simple mindfulness, it seems so simple that nothing could come of it. But believe me, you can enter states just like Pranayama did by understanding how the breath really works. And this little simple practice like this can take you a long, 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 long way. And if you want to do variations of breath, there are so many. For example, there's what's called sama pranayama, which means even breathing. That means you breathe in for a certain amount of seconds. You breathe out for a certain amount of seconds. And between each inhale and between each exhale, you hold it for a certain amount of seconds. So you might breathe in for 10 seconds, hold it for 10 seconds, breathe out for 10 seconds, and hold it for 10 seconds before breathing in again, and keep going like that. That's one of my personal favorite ways of breathing, so doing this. But that ratio can change. Like you could have the inhale twice as long as the exhale. And in one of the most wonderful books, if not the most wonderful books on this subject, is Iyengar's book called Light on Pranayama. And in it, he goes through probably 150 different ratios you can try and different forms of this breath mastery. But I just told you you can just do this very simple practice I just mentioned, and that's enough for a long, long time. Some people use it for their entire life. That they just it unfolds for you, different subtleties of it. So it just depends on your dedication. If you really practice for that half hour every day, or a half hour morning and evening, it works. So let's see here. So I just ended this. The last paragraph just says it's a means of encouragement. It says that if you really want encouragement, consider what Sri Yukteswar, Priyananda's teacher, said about this kind of samadhi where you enter a breathless state. He says that 1 minute of breathless samadhi is that state where the inner breath is the only breath that's working. the outer breath has ceased. He says 1 minute of that kind of absorption, mental absorption, is equal to 1 year of spiritual evolution. So that's how powerful this breath mastery is. So, if you really want a high, potency, injection into your psychic happiness being, and really find out who you are and what life's all about beyond, what we already know, sights, sounds, smells, physical sensations, tastes, and thoughts, musing about this and that. What's beyond that? So that's how you can find out. The breath is a door to that. So that concludes this video.